Okay, this is Paula from Plantland, here with our Vegetable Gardening 2 class, and this is the class that on our schedule of in-person classes was going to be Vegetable Gardening 2, where I was going to talk to you about what vegetables we can grow here in the Flathead Valley. So, I've divided it into two different kinds of vegetables. Ones that you can plant before all danger of frost is past, and ones where you have to wait until all danger of frost has passed. And just a reminder that here in northwest Montana, our average last frost dates occur sometime between the middle of May and the end of May, and our first frost dates in fall occur sometime between the 1st of September and the middle of September. So that's our basic growing season. That does vary a little bit. If you're down on the lake, you're going to be frost-free a little earlier. If you're up on a mountain, you're going to be frost-free a little later. The other thing that we talked about real quick is soil temperature. When we look at our seed packs, a lot of them actually talk directly about what temperature your soil should be before you plant your seeds or before you put plants out. And so we talked about soil thermometers. I took the temperature of my raised beds down on Flathead Lake earlier this week during all this nice warm weather we were having, and they were up between 45 and 50 degrees. So there's lots of things that I need to get started planting. This little bit of cold this weekend is going to set us back a little bit, but maybe not too badly. So let's start with some of the things that you can actually plant now in the garden. If you look at packs of lettuce, and this is all from the Good Seed Company right here in Whitefish, you'll see that on the back of the seed package, and I always like to remind people that the seed package has all kinds of good information that you can use. It says here, direct seed outdoors as soon as the soil can be worked or when soil temperature reaches 40 degrees Fahrenheit. So when we talk about if the soil can be worked, we're talking about soil that's neither too wet nor too dry. If you reach down and scoop up some of your garden soil and squeeze it in your hand into a ball, if water runs out between your fingers, that's soil that's too wet. If when you open your hand, it doesn't stay in a nice little ball of soil, it just falls right apart, that's soil that's too dry. Too dry is really easy to fix. Too wet means that you have to wait until the soil has a chance to dry out some. So that's what these packages mean when they say when the soil can be worked. So this is actually a kale, but all of these lettuces, and I have to keep putting my glasses on and off, leaf lettuce, butter crunch lettuce, which forms that nice little kind of sort of head, romaine lettuce, which of course forms a big head, mesclun early spring mixed lettuce. These are all things that you can sow when the soil just gets up to about 40 degrees, so long as your soil can be worked. And you're all getting pretty close to that in a lot of places here in the valley. Lettuce is a cool season crop, which means that once we get to the hotter days of summer, your lettuce is going to be done producing. Lettuce is going to do what we call bolt. It's going to start to produce that flower stalk. And once it starts to produce that flower stalk, your lettuce leaves are apt to become very bitter and not very tasty. And so lettuce is pretty much done when we get into those warmer days of summer. Kale and spinach are also cool season crops, and the same thing. You're going to get most of your kale and spinach during the early season. When we get to the hotter days of summer, they're going to, again, bolt, and they're not going to be something you can grow for the whole summer. That brings me up to the topic of cool season plants and succession plantings. People quite often plant these things and then plan to plant something that you put out later in that same spot. Or they plan to put out a second crop of something later in that same spot. So these are cool season crops. They're things that you're going to grow this time of year. You're going to put the seeds in pretty early. We wouldn't normally plant plants. You can plant plants, and Plantland has plants of kale and lettuce and all these things that you can put out. But typically you would plant the seeds. If you want to do plants, you can have to do the little business of hardening off, where you put them outside during the day, even a cold blustery day like today, and bring them inside at night. You don't bring them into a warm spot again, you bring them into a cool spot again. So you could do plants, but you actually can plant most of these from seed. One of the other things that we can grow this time of year, both from seed and from onion sets, is onions. Now, big bulb onions like this, you would have, if you wanted to put these out, if you just plant these seeds in the ground now, what's going to happen is you're not going to get very big onions. The growing season won't be quite long enough. Typically these seeds here in Montana, despite what it says on the package, about sowing them directly in the ground. It's better to sow them very early. Sow these in about January or so, inside in seed flats, and then put out small plants this time of year. That helps ensure that you're going to get bigger plants. So growing from seed is something you can do, and onions are very easy to grow from seed. But if you put seeds in the ground this time of year, you're probably not going to get big supermarket-sized onions. Remember, the other thing we do with onions is we sell onion sets, which are the little tiny versions of an onion that you're going to plant into the ground this time of year, and it's going to turn into a big onion. And with onions, I always like to remind people that one plant, one onion set onion, equals one onion. It's not going to reproduce in some fashion underground. So if you put out only 10 little plants, you're only going to get 10 little onions. The other kind of onions that you can plant in the ground here this time of year, which are going to grow up just fine and do really well for you, are green onions, spring onions. Those actually you can plant in the ground very early. The seeds germinate. I think the soil temperature is around 40. I'm going to check it with my glasses. 45 ideal. 45 degrees ideal. So I could plant these in my raised beds down on the lake. And these are green onions, bunching onions. These are something that you grow to eat fresh in salads and things like that. I grow a lot of them, and then I dry them and use them through the winter in different kinds of dishes. You can grow carrots very early. You can plant carrot seeds very early. The soil only has to be somewhere between 45 and 50 degrees for carrots to germinate pretty well. So that's something you can grow pretty early. I discovered something online this past year that's really just cracks me up. Over in England, people grow carrots. They're basically taking 55-gallon drums and filling them with a mix of sand and potting soil, and then growing carrots and parsnips in the 55-gallon drums. And they end up with these carrots that are like this. And it seems to be some kind of English Women's Institute gardening competition. It's kind of entertaining. It's kind of fun. But it's a good reminder that carrots need to have really good loose soil that they grow in so that they grow to their full size. So carrots are something that you can put out this time of year. Snow peas, the kind of peas we use in Asian cooking, are something you can plant very early. We're coming up on when we can get these in the ground. We always used to say that we would plant our snap peas on St. Patty's Day in Montana. That hasn't been true for a few years. We've had too much snow on St. Patty's Day to do that. But you can get snap peas out pretty early. And there's something, again, that we consider a cool weather crop, meaning they're going to produce mostly before the weather gets too hot. So when you get into the warmer days of July and August, snap peas are going to be done producing. And snap peas are something that bring us to the idea that you have to have a spot where they can have something to climb on. Whether you're planting them next to a fence, whether you're putting up a little trellis for them, putting up a little netting for them. Snap peas, you're going to get better production if those vines have a chance to climb something, because what happens is then more of the vine is getting exposed to sunlight and to air to produce flowers, to produce snap peas. So that's early season. Radishes are a pretty early season crop, and radishes are one of those things that even though we think of them as an early season, cool season crop, you actually can continue to plant radishes for most of the summer. So you can plant a row of radishes and harvest them, and then when you've gotten all of those out of there, you can dig the soil back up, plant another row of radishes and harvest them, and you can pretty much keep yourself in radishes all summer. It's a really good, it and carrots, radishes and carrots, are both really good crops to teach kids about gardening with, because they both have really high germination rates and really high success rates. And it's kind of fun for the kids to see the plants on the top of the ground, and then to realize that when they pull the plant up, the thing they're going to eat is underground. Kids really seem to like that. So these are really good beginner plants for children. One of the other things we plant really early, beets. Again, there's something that you can get in the ground when the ground is up in that 45 to 50 degree range, and you can plant seeds for beets. You don't need to start any plants ahead of time. And that's true of all of these plants that I've just talked about. That generally speaking, you're going to be planting seeds in the ground, and you're going to be able to grow something from seed in the ground to a mature plant that you're going to eat. Now we're going to get a little into some of the plants that you have to either wait to plant the seeds in the ground, or you have to actually put out plants. So I'm going to talk about some of the ones that you put out plants first, because that's something that if you're going to do it, you should be doing now. Things like peppers and tomatoes, so we'll start with peppers. You cannot plant pepper seeds in the ground here at any point in the growing season and expect a plant to grow up and expect to get fully grown peppers from it. You need to start the seeds either inside earlier, and typically we would say sometime around the end of February. We're getting into April now, so the window is closing down for being able to start things like peppers and tomatoes from seed inside and have big enough plants to put outside. You still can try, but you're going to want to use all of your protection, winter protection type things like wall of waters, which we've talked about to do that. So peppers are something where we either grow a little plant from seed, and we typically put it out when it's a good 5 to 6 inches high, or we come buy plants from places like Plantland. So we're going to, we'll have lots of peppers. I'm sure we have all of them now. Michelle's shaking her head yes. Are they ready for sale? And they're ready for sale. Lots of pepper plants now. It's too early to put them out though. Peppers are something like tomatoes that you have to wait until all danger of frost is past to put those plants out. Now we have talked about strategies like wall of waters and stuff to protect your plants, but these are really pretty tender plants, and if you put them out too early and they get too many little cold shocks, it'll affect their ability to produce fruit later on. And so you don't want to put them out wicked early, but you can try with some varieties of things. Hot peppers especially want heat. I leave my hot peppers in my greenhouse past the 4th of July because I want them to get as much heat as possible. So these are things, peppers and tomatoes are things where we're either have already gotten our seeds started and are working on little plants, or we're going to come buy little plants that we'll put out in the garden. The other things, kinds of things that's true of, eggplant for example. It's a little late to start eggplant seeds. You still could, but you'd be putting out small plants. But eggplant is something where we sell the plants, and you can get those plants and put them out after all danger of frost is past. Eggplant, like tomatoes and peppers, grows, if you want to grow, or like, I'm stumbling now, sorry about that. Eggplant, like peppers, are something you can grow in a relatively small pot. I grow mine in pots that are about this high and about this big around. They're 5-gallon nursery pots. And so that's something that one plant per pot you can actually grow in a container. So peppers and eggplant are something you're going to put a plant out after all danger of frost is past. Other things that you would do that with, broccoli is something where you would want to start seeds early, and you can start broccoli seeds now and still get a big enough plant to put out when it's time to put broccoli out. Broccoli is another tough one in that when it gets to the hotter part of the summer, you may start to have some problems with it flowering and bolting. So you want to get your broccoli plants out early, but you want to put plants out. You're not putting seeds in the ground to try and start it. And then here we have pumpkins, pie pumpkin, and winter squash. Winter squash is different than summer squash. A zucchini is a summer squash. Winter squashes are the ones that you grow like a Hubbard. Like this is a Burgess Buttercup winter squash. The big hard squashes that you grow that you can store. So winter squash is something where you need to start the seeds inside and put a small plant out after all danger of frost has passed. Same thing with pumpkins. You want to start those seeds, and for either of these, now is a good time to start the seeds. And you're going to put a small plant out when all danger of frost has passed. Back to Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, and cabbage. All the same idea, that you're going to put small plants out after danger of frost is passed. So you're going to plant these seeds inside and grow small plants, and there's still plenty of time to do that, and then you're going to put them out. Sometimes the seed packages actually tell you that you can plant stuff outside. They're not usually talking about a place like Northwest Montana when they tell you that on the packages. The people who write the stuff on the seed packages have a hard time because they have to write these seed packages to be good for almost the whole world. So cabbage, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts, you're going to plant seeds and then put out small plants when all danger of frost is past. Corn, pretty easy to grow here. Now corn is one of the ones that falls into kind of a funny category because you actually can plant corn seed in the ground here and grow up corn to get it big enough. But you do a little better if you plant the seeds maybe 3 weeks or so, 2 to 3 weeks or so before you want to put the corn out, and put little plants out rather than planting seed. Lots of people do grow it from seed, but my experience is that if you put small plants out, you're going to get a little better yield. And corn is one of those things that you should grow in a peat pot, not a plastic pot. So you should grow it in the kind of pot that's biodegradable, that when you plant the whole pot in the ground, it just dissolves over the summer. The reason for that is corn is one of those plants that doesn't like to be transplanted. But you can grow it from seed in the ground. The trouble is that not the trouble, it's a little better if you put out plants that are 2-3 inches high or so. You'll get a little bit of yield earlier. Cucumber is another one that you can plant the seeds in the ground once the seed is warm enough. And now we're talking about soil temperatures up in the 65 to 70 degree range, which is obviously end of May or early June. You can plant cucumber seed in the ground, but you're probably going to have better results in most parts of northwest Montana if you plant little plants. So cucumber's one where, again, 2 to 3 weeks before you want to put them out, you can plant the seed, again, in peat pots. Very important to use peat pots for cucumbers because they're another one that resents being transplanted, and so if you try to transplant them and take them out of a plastic pot, they're very apt to just wilt and pass on, as we say, when you try to transplant them. So cucumbers, you can try growing it in the soil. Down on Flathead Lake, it's not too hard to do that. But generally speaking, even I down there tend to put out little plants. But you only need to start those seeds 2 to 3 weeks before you want to put them out. So not everything needs to be started from seed now or earlier in the year. And cucumber is a good example where if you tried to start seeds for this, say in February, and then you were putting out gigantic plants because it just seemed like a good idea to you, the odds are pretty good that those big plants would suffer some kind of transplant shock and not survive when you try to put them in the ground. So no need to worry about starting those seeds too early. Other seeds that are kind of like that, green bean seeds, you're going to plant in the ground once all danger of frost is past. And here in Montana, you can very much reliably grow green beans from seeds in the ground. We do sell plants that you can put out, and some people do the same thing that they do with corn and cucumbers. They started a little bit early, they put those seeds out, and then they plant seeds early to start to put little plants out. Again, it's something that you should use peat pots, you should use biodegradable pots to do that. And beans are, there's 2 different kinds of beans basically in broad categories. There's pole beans and there's bush beans. Pole beans, like the name implies, climb, so you need to provide some support for it to go up. Bush beans, on the other hand, are smaller and bushier. They do need some kind of support once they get laden with beans, but that support can be pretty simple. It can be just a few sticks or something on the main stems of the plants. So beans are something you're going to plant. You can plant seeds in the ground once the ground is warmed to 65 to 70 degrees. Same thing is true of summer squashes like zucchini and yellow crookneck. These are the soft squashes that don't store, that you're going to grow for fresh eating. They are usually prolific producers. Zucchini is an especially prolific producer. I always like to tell the story of a friend of mine who was new to gardening, who proudly called me one day, and she had planted her garden and she had planted 12 hills of zucchini. I'm sure she still has neighbors who don't talk to her because she was leaving zucchinis on their porches at night. They're very prolific producers. Typically, zucchini and yellow crookneck type squashes, you really only need 1 or 2 plants. One of the things to know about zucchini and this kind of squash is, and this is unusual in our garden plants, is that there are male and female plants. And so for a zucchini plant, if you get too many female plants without enough pollinators, not enough males, you're not going to get good squash production. And that's something we see sometimes with some of the heirloom varieties. We see some issues with pollination with these kinds of squashes. The seed companies are all getting better about packing their seeds a little better to make up for that. But they're one of the things, zucchini should seem like the easiest thing in the world to grow, and then people have problems with it producing a flower and a small squash, but then the squash never grows to size, and that most often has to do with pollination. Turnips, if any of you are really going to be hardcore gardeners, are another thing that's really easy to grow. It's another thing that you would put out seeds after the danger of frost is passed, after the ground is warmed to 65 to 70 degrees, you would put out turnip seeds. Same with parsnips. I brought a muskmelon seeds up, and we sell muskmelon and watermelon seeds, and this is a good example of something that you can grow in Montana, but this is one of the hardest things to grow here in Montana. Sweet potatoes would be in this category too. Our soil just doesn't get warm enough. Our nighttime temperatures drop too low, and the soil just doesn't get warm enough. Those nighttime temperatures dropping down means that the soil loses its heat during the night, and these plants suffer for it. What you can do is use black plastic, black poly, and it can be as simple as heavy-duty garbage sacks that you cut up. You can take black landscape fabric too, Typar or the Sunbelt kind of stuff that we sell as a weed suppressor, and you grow your cantaloupes and watermelons and sweet potatoes under that. What you do is just cut a hole where you're going to put the plant, and you're going to grow these from seed indoors early and put out a small plant. And then you're going to cut a hole in the plastic, and you usually put the poly down early so that the sun is doing its job warming that ground up to a higher temperature than the surrounding garden. And then you're going to plant those little plants in those holes, and then over the growing season that black poly is going to both absorb more heat from the sun and heat the soil up hotter, and it's also going to prevent that nighttime drop in soil temperature from the soil heat radiating out. So you can grow these here, but there's something that it takes a little more special effort to grow. So that's the basic timeline of planting your garden. And I know I went through it really quickly. There's, remember, lots and lots of handouts about all these things on our website that Michelle's going to zoom in on, plant-land.com. Tons of handouts that we've written over the years about all these things on that. For a long time I did a series of classes called 3 in 30 where we did 3 vegetables in 30 minutes, and all of those handouts are on the website. So you can download those or read them at your leisure. Now we're going to shift gears away from your plants with your garden and talk about a few of them that need special supports. So a lot of things are going to be just fine if you never do anything for them. They're just going to, you plant the plant, you plant the seed, it's going to come up, it doesn't need any special support. Tomatoes, on the other hand, do need lots of such special support. You have to think of how heavy and big a tomato can get if you're a successful gardener. And so we sell things called tomato cages, which are wire rings that you put around your tomato plants. And we'll do a quick class on some of these supports and stuff when we're further into the season, and that's the kind of stuff you should be doing. But tomatoes are something where you need to plan for it to have some kind of support. I typically put a center stake on mine and tie the center leader of my tomatoes up, and then I put a tomato cage around to support the weight. Peppers, sometimes I put small cages around peppers because it's a good idea just to support that weight again. Same thing is true with eggplant. Now peppers and eggplant, especially sweet peppers, and particularly true of eggplant, are plants that benefit from a little bit of thinning once they've flowered. Once my eggplant starts to produce flowers, if I want to get nice sized eggplants, I usually take about 1/3 of the flowers off the plant. And that gives me much bigger eggplants because the plant is putting its energy into producing those fruits rather than trying to produce a bunch of small fruits. The same thing is true with sweet peppers. If it looks like it's producing too many flowers, I'll go in and pinch off perhaps 1/3, maybe even half as many of the flowers for sweet peppers. That's called thinning, and you're trying to get the plant to put its energy into producing specific fruit. Let's see. Most of this other stuff, we talked a little about beans and pole beans. So that's probably enough chatting on my part about seeds and growing. I'm going to remind you about soil thermometers. Good investment for people who are becoming serious gardeners to have soil thermometers. going to remind you about soil testing kits. Again, good investment to make in your garden, especially if you're just tilling up land for the very first time and trying to make a garden. A soil test is a critical thing to do because we do not have native soil that's good garden soil. We'll be back with more of these. We recorded some little classes to do. Plantlands hours at this time are Monday through Saturday, 10 to 4. We have special shopping hours for the elderly and the people who have special needs on Tuesday and Thursday mornings from 9 to 10 a.m. And we're doing all we can to try to keep you gardening. I hope lots of you are out there planting seeds and doing things, and you can call us anytime with questions. So thanks for watching. Paula from Plantland, and happy gardening.